Hi, I'm Jamie Bernard, Vice President of Solutions Strategy and Head of Global Solutions at Valiantys. We are an IT consultancy and an Atlassian Platinum Partner, and we help our customers solve very complex problems. I prefer to just get the awkward part out of the way when I do these things. So your AI and cloud strategy, it's probably a house of cards. For the last 20 years, I've had a front row seat to the disconnect between IT and business strategies. I have seen it and I have lived it. I've seen it several times in my career as a consultant, and I've lived it as an owner of a very large portfolio in a Fortune 50. I have been in the trenches, and I can tell you where some of these big bets usually go sideways or outright fail. It is almost never because the vision is bad. They fail because the hull of the ship is cracking. It is this unsexy stuff, the plumbing problems that create so much friction that your technology just cannot keep up with your ambition. That's the disconnect. So today we're not going to talk about more hype. We are going to have an honest conversation about the foundational work that determines whether your biggest investments will pay off or fall flat, though. So let's get into it. That disconnect I mentioned always starts with hype, though. Always. But hype isn't bad. That's the exciting promise of AI and cloud that gets everyone in the boardroom nodding their heads and gets your organization really stoked about the future. And it should. It's exciting. But then there's the reality. There's the boring part of what we do. And it must be done. And it tends to be really messy, but that's the hygiene or the lack of it. And while the boardroom and the market are focused on hype, the engine room is filled with dedicated people wrestling with your technology rot. Yes, I know we call it tech debt, but that is far too pretty a term and it's way too palatable. I use rot because it's visceral and everybody wants to get rid of rot. People have learned to live with debt. Now, in many companies, this mess can be pretty overwhelming. And that lack of hygiene, that rot, it has very real consequences that you're feeling every day. And that reality is that there's a good chunk of your budget that's subsidizing a money furnace. It's like your teams are in the engine room and they're forced to shovel cash in a fireplace just to keep things running. I mean, listen, Gartner estimates up to 30% of software spend is waste. So if we do some back of the napkin math for mid-sized enterprises, that can be a $20 million cash bonfire. So that leaves us with a really uncomfortable question. If we have this money furnace in our engine room that's literally burning cash, why don't we just put it out? Well, this comic is the most honest answer I have ever seen to that question. It is the story of just about every modern IT enterprise that's been around longer than a decade. And if you don't believe me, go ask the most tenured person on your infrastructure team and tell me what they say. But what I like about this picture, though, is that on top, you have this shiny yacht, and that's the hype. That's what we sell to the board and to the market. But underneath that is often a hole rotting away, and your best people are on that flimsy swing, patching it together just to stay afloat, fighting the good fight. And many of those folks are pretty frustrated that they have to do that while some of your most interesting work is outsourced. I assure you, most in-house teams would rather be working on the sexy stuff. Now, what happens when someone comes along with new planks and better tools to actually fix that hole? Well, we hear some of the most expensive words in business. Sorry, we're too busy right now. We can't. We are literally too busy sailing a sinking ship and stop and fix it. And for those of you who do have the time and budgets, you are rightfully skeptical because it's yet another person promising a turnkey solution to what ails you. And some of that is really just a polite, largely unintentional fiction. In my 20 years in the trenches, I have learned that too busy is usually masking a much deeper issue or two that paralyzes your organization. Fear and futility. I mean, let's be honest, right? A real diagnostic, it exposes waste. It finds all sorts of ugly stuff. And in many companies, the person who finds the problem becomes the problem. And the reward for telling that truth is that you either get blamed for the mess or now you have a massive cleanup project on your hands on top of your day job. So congratulations, you get FOMO'd and got a whole second job to do. Well done. That's not super attractive, right? So we tend to stay silent and just deal with it. Sometimes it feels safer. But this is actually the answer. You don't try to fight the entire blaze at once. You cordon off the fire. And even then, the size of that cordon sanitaire matters because the depending on the size of your company, a value stream still might be too big, and with it, the risk. So I've got shielded value stream on screen, but frankly, you have to shield something, whether it's a value stream or not. So instead of attempting the kind of transformation theater that got us into this mess, we're going to take a different approach. We'll find one critical value stream or portfolio, right size it to that risk, and shield that from the rest of the organizational chaos. Now you create this bubble of hygiene and give it the air cover that it needs to succeed and prove that a better way of working is possible. It needs to be risky enough to be interesting, but not so risky that failure would be catastrophic. It is a delicate balance. So now I put this slide here to take a pause, because when you do this, when you go through that diagnostic process and you diagnose that first slice of the business, you are going to have a moment. It's the holy shit moment. It is when you see all of those zeros and the sheer scale of the waste. Those two things we just talked about, fear and futility, those are going to come at you hard and tempt you to kick the can again. This is a completely normal feeling. Work through it though, because you can cordon it off. And what does that look like? I mean, it comes down to principles over a canned playbook, quite honestly. There is no clean manual. There's no one template to rule them all and in the darkness bind them. Anyone who says differently is lying to you. But there are principles you can follow as you cycle through this process. First, you've got to unify the system of record. It's not just about SaaS licenses, but we talk a lot about those because we can put our hands on it. It's tangible. And it might be tools for one team or business unit, but then data for another, or process for another one, or some mix of all of the above if you're in the middle of an M&A cutover especially. The truth is that technology rot has many faces. The second one is that you govern by design. This means real ongoing funding governance to stop the decentralized tool sprawl that fuels the furnace. We are talking about the spend that flies under the procurement radar, that one that's usually buried in the budget line item, that part. That's one of the 10,000 paper cuts that created this problem. This is not done by people working for big SaaS, trying to spend all the company money on software. These are people who are seeking to do the jobs they need to do with the tools they have available to them. But there is a need to govern that to ensure that the system, at the system level, that it's fit for purpose and not redundant. Next, you measure where you will have the most impact. That is going to be where you can reclaim as much of that waste as possible. You also want to do no harm to the business. And that's that balance we talked about, the tricky part, the do no harm. But lastly, and this isn't a once and done exercise, you do have to improve it continuously until you hit that point of diminishing returns and eventually sunset it. You take that demonstrated savings and reinvest it to fix the next most painful workflow or system or hardware, whichever one has been measured to prove the most impact. This savings is demonstrated in both time and money. Where you have people whose time is reclaimed, that's reinvestment on the table too. That's how you turn this vicious cycle into a virtuous one. And as you scale, the rule is simple. Don't push the clean process back into the dysfunction. You pull that dysfunction forward, sequester it with the line of sight to the healthy system to be fixed, and then you merge those together as you get them fixed. That's the approach. But I think it's more important to move on from principles to proof with an actual example. We worked with a global leader in GPS and wearables who wanted to get rid of their rot. They had multiple siloed dev tools spread across 6 different on-prem environments. Among other issues, it created fragmented reporting and as a result, very slow decision-making for leadership in a very competitive area. It was this money furnace in action. Applying the principles we just discussed, we helped them cordon off the fire and diagnose the issues. We focused on impact and we unified those 6 separate instances into a single cloud environment. We then helped them govern their data, creating a single source of truth and integrating analytics for real-time reporting, which immediately gave them the ability to manage and measure what was actually happening across the organization. And that impact was incredible. They didn't just consolidate 6 environments into one and call it a day, which in and of itself makes people's lives better, by the way. They unlocked $2.5 million in savings that could then be reinvested back into the business. Our client didn't find failure. They found fuel. They found that $2.5 million in this mythical trapped value that everybody talks about. They found proof that the boring, unsexy work of fixing the core is what directly unlocks the exciting results that everyone is chasing. It creates this powerful two-sided win. You get credibility and you move faster. The credibility buys you capital with the business and helps you get that IT and business strategy oriented towards that same goal. And it creates a talk track to your bosses. You can walk into AOP with found money from that furnace and illustrate which exciting new innovation can be funded with what amounts to your seed money. This is how the boring work funds the exciting work. And no offense to people who enjoy boring work. I happen to like it. But you either take that money and you reinvest it back in to improve the system, or you pivot it into another product or area of the business and expand it, or you innovate. So here's your first move. Talk to people. Don't ambush them though. If you toss a workload discussion on someone's calendar, or you hit them up in a hallway drive-by for a quick chat, you are going to see their soul leave their body before you can even ask them for an answer. Terrifying them is not the goal. Create safety. Partner with them. Go to a leader on your team who you trust. Buy them a coffee and frame it with empathy. And tell them that you want to understand the world they live in and see what they deal with and what they might be unintentionally shielding you from because they've just accepted the rot as part of their day-to-day. Make sure that they know that this is not a trap. Create the conditions for truth, but not just event session, even though that's healthy. You want to create the conditions for a way out as well, because let's be honest, these folks, after they have their coffee, they're going to go back caffeinated to their 50-plus hour work week. They are too busy sailing the broken ship to stop and draw you a map of the icebergs. And that's okay. It's not their job to draw you that map. Your teams are the heroes making magic happen in spite of the chaos. It's not their job to also be the cleanup crew. But you do need to fix it. And this is where a strategic partner comes in. Your role as a leader is to give that partner a mandate to do the forensics work for you and then follow the data trails, the broken processes, the consequences of unmitigated Conway's Law wreaking havoc, and draw that roadmap. This frees your heroes up to keep building the future while a dedicated partner helps you find the fuel. Fix the hull and make that yacht go faster. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate that you spent it with me. And if you're in search of a partner to examine your hull, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll help you clean up.